There comes a time in many lives when motivation seems to disappear. What once felt exciting becomes heavy, dull, and strangely meaningless. You wake up with plans, yet something inside refuses to move. The world may call this laziness or lack of discipline, but the deeper truth is far more complex. Often when motivation fades, it is not because the spirit is weak, it is because the soul is trying to communicate something that the conscious mind has ignored for too long. Many people spend years pursuing goals that were never truly their own. They follow expectations given by family, society, or the quiet pressure to fit into a predetermined image of success. At first, this path can feel rewarding because it brings approval and recognition. But beneath the surface, the psyche senses the misalignment. Over time, the inner self begins to withdraw its energy. What people call losing motivation is sometimes the mind a silent rebellion against a life that no longer feels authentic. Another reason motivation fades is because the unconscious mind carries unresolved emotions. Experiences that were never fully understood, disappointment, rejection, failure, or hidden fears remain buried below awareness. These hidden forces quietly drain energy from the present moment. You may believe you simply don't feel like doing anything, but deep within, parts of the psyche are asking to be acknowledged and integrated. There is also a profound psychological shift that happens when a person begins to outgrow their previous identity. The goals that once drove you may suddenly feel empty because they belong to an earlier version of yourself. This can feel confusing, even frightening. You may think something is wrong with you, when in reality your inner world is evolving. Motivation disappears because the old direction no longer represents who you are becoming. Silence, boredom, and lack of drive can also be signals that the psyche needs rest from constant stimulation and external validation. Modern life often pushes individuals to always produce, always achieve, always prove their worth. But the human mind is not designed for endless output. Sometimes motivation fades because the deeper layers of the self require reflection, stillness, and renewal before moving forward again. It is important to understand that the loss of motivation is not always a failure. Sometimes it is a psychological crossroads. The absence of drive forces a person to question their path, their values, and their inner truth. It creates a space where deeper awareness can emerge. In that silence, a person may begin to rediscover what genuinely matters rather than what they were conditioned to chase. When motivation eventually returns, it often comes in a different form. It becomes quieter but stronger. Instead of being driven by fear, comparison, or external approval, it begins to arise from a deeper sense of meaning. The person is no longer moving simply because they are moving because something within them has awakened. So if motivation has left your life, it may not be the end of your drive. It may be the beginning of a transformation that requires patience, honesty, and courage to understand. Loss of motivation is often misunderstood as laziness, weakness, or lack of discipline. In reality, it can be a subtle psychological signal that something deeper is misaligned within the individual. When a person feels consistently drained, uninterested, or emotionally disconnected from their goals, it may indicate that those goals do not truly reflect their authentic desires. The human psyche has an inherent need for meaning and personal truth. When actions and ambitions are shaped primarily by external expectations rather than inner conviction, the mind eventually begins to resist the path being followed. Many individuals grow up absorbing ideas about success from their surroundings. Family members, cultural norms, social media, and societal standards often define what a successful life should look like over time. These expectations can become internalized so deeply that a person begins to pursue them without ever questioning whether they genuinely resonate with their own values. At first, this pursuit may bring excitement, especially when it leads to praise, approval, or validation from others. But beneath that surface satisfaction, a quiet tension can begin to form within the psyche. This tension emerges because the deeper layers of the mind recognize the difference between authentic desire and borrowed ambition. When a person invests energy into a direction that does not truly belong to them, the unconscious mind gradually withdraws its support. Motivation, which once seemed abundant, begins to fade. Tasks that once felt purposeful start to feel heavy and meaningless. The individual may feel confused, wondering why something that once seemed so important now feels empty. This experience can create an internal conflict. On one side, there is the pressure to continue pursuing the established goal because of the time, effort, or expectations attached to it. On the other side, there is an inner voice quietly suggesting that the path may not be aligned with one's deeper identity. When these two forces collide, motivation often becomes the first casualty. The mind struggles to generate energy for something that no longer feels psychologically true. Another factor contributing to this loss of motivation is the emotional cost of maintaining a false direction. When people constantly push themselves toward goals that do not reflect their authentic selves, they begin to experience emotional fatigue. The effort required to sustain enthusiasm becomes exhausting because it is not supported by genuine interest or passion. Over time, this emotional strain manifests as procrastination, lack of focus, and an overall sense of detachment from one's work or responsibilities. In some cases, this loss of motivation serves an important psychological purpose, forces the individual to pause and examine their life more honestly. Without the automatic drive to continue, a person is given the opportunity to question why they are pursuing certain goals and whether those goals still hold meaning. This period of reflection can be uncomfortable, but it often opens the door to greater self-awareness. When individuals begin to reconnect with their authentic interests, values, and personal truth, motivation often begins to reappear naturally. Energy returns not because of external pressure, but because the actions being taken now resonate with the deeper structure of the self. What once felt like a constant struggle becomes a more natural expression of who the person truly is, and the sense of purpose gradually replaces the emptiness that once drained their motivation. Hidden emotions and unresolved psychological experiences often exist beneath the surface of conscious awareness, quietly influencing a person's thoughts, behaviors, and energy levels. Many people believe their lack of motivation or persistent mental fatigue comes from external circumstances such as stress, workload, or lack of discipline. However, the deeper cause can sometimes lie within the parts of the psyche that have been ignored, suppressed, or left unexamined for long periods of time. These internal experiences do not simply disappear when they are pushed aside. Instead, they remain active in the unconscious mind, subtly consuming emotional and psychological energy. When a person goes through difficult experiences such as rejection, failure, betrayal, or emotional pain, the mind often tries to protect itself by pushing those feelings out of immediate awareness. This protective mechanism can help someone continue functioning in daily life, but the emotions associated with those events rarely dissolve on their own. They remain stored within the psyche, forming unresolved emotional patterns that continue to influence how a person feels and reacts in the present. Over time, these hidden emotional burdens begin to drain mental energy in ways that are not immediately obvious. The unconscious mind constantly works to manage these unresolved experiences. It attempts to keep painful memories suppressed, while simultaneously preventing them from fully resurfacing into conscious awareness. This internal effort requires a significant amount of psychological energy. Even when a person is not actively thinking about past events, the mind is still working in the background to maintain emotional balance. As a result, the individual may begin to feel mentally exhausted, distracted, or unable to focus on current goals. Unresolved emotions can also create subtle internal conflicts that weaken motivation. For example, someone who has experienced repeated criticism or failure may unconsciously develop a fear of trying again. Even if the conscious mind wants to move forward, another part of the psyche may resist action in order to avoid the possibility of repeating past pain. This conflict between the desire to grow and the desire to stay emotionally safe can lead to hesitation, procrastination, and a gradual loss of motivation. Another way hidden emotions drain mental energy is through constant rumination and emotional tension. When unresolved experiences remain buried, they often reappear indirectly through intrusive thoughts, anxiety, or feelings of restlessness. A person may feel unsettled without clearly understanding why. Their attention becomes divided between present tasks and the quiet emotional weight they carry inside. This division of attention reduces clarity, creativity, and the ability to fully engage with life. Over time, the accumulation of these unprocessed emotions can create a sense of psychological heaviness. Even simple tasks may begin to feel overwhelming because the mind is already burdened with unresolved inner material. What appears on the surface as laziness or lack of drive may actually be the result of emotional exhaustion caused by experiences that were never fully acknowledged or understood. When individuals begin to recognize and process these hidden emotions, they often notice a gradual return of mental clarity and energy. By bringing unconscious experiences into awareness, the mind no longer needs to expend as much effort suppressing them. The emotional tension begins to release, allowing psychological energy to flow more freely toward present goals and meaningful activities. This process does not happen instantly, but with patience and honest self-reflection, the mind slowly regains the vitality that was once quietly drained by unresolved inner experiences. People sometimes lose motivation not because they have become lazy or incapable, but because they are gradually outgrowing the identity and direction that once defined their lives. Human beings are not static. The mind evolves through experiences, reflection, and inner development. The goals, values, and ambitions that once felt meaningful can slowly lose their emotional power as a person begins to change internally. When this transformation starts to occur, motivation often fades because the path being followed no longer aligns with the emerging version of the self. In earlier stages of life, individuals often build their identity around certain roles, achievements, or expectations. A person may see themselves as a dedicated student, a career-driven professional, or someone striving to meet family or societal standards. These identities can provide structure and motivation for many years because they offer a clear sense of purpose. However, as people gain more life experience, their perspective on success, fulfillment, and meaning can begin to shift. What once seemed important may gradually start to feel empty or disconnected from their deeper values. This transition can be confusing because it rarely happens suddenly. Instead, it unfolds slowly through subtle feelings of dissatisfaction or restlessness. A person may notice that the goals they once pursued with excitement now feel forced or mechanical. Activities that once inspired enthusiasm may begin to feel routine and emotionally distant. The individual may try to push themselves harder, believing that discipline alone will restore their motivation, but the deeper issue is often that the identity supporting those goals is beginning to dissolve. When the mind outgrows an old identity, it enters a period of psychological uncertainty. The familiar sense of direction that once guided decisions becomes less clear, and a new direction has not yet fully formed. During this phase, motivation can weaken because the psyche is in the process of reorganizing itself. The individual may feel stuck between two versions of themselves, the person they used to be and the person they are slowly becoming. This internal shift often creates tension between comfort and growth. The old identity feels familiar and safe because it has been reinforced by years of habits and expectations. Yet continuing to live according to that identity may feel increasingly unnatural. At the same time, the new identity is still unclear and uncertain. The mind may sense that change is necessary, but may not yet understand what that change should look like. This ambiguity can create a temporary loss of drive, as the individual no longer feels fully connected to the direction they once followed. Another reason motivation fades during this transition is that the psyche requires time to integrate new insights and experiences. Growth often involves questioning long-held beliefs about success, relationships, and personal purpose. As these beliefs begin to shift, the person must reconstruct their sense of meaning from a deeper and more authentic place. This process requires reflection, patience, and sometimes solitude, which can appear externally as a period of stagnation or lack of ambition. Although this phase can feel unsettling, it often signals an important stage of psychological development. The loss of motivation is not always a failure of willpower. Sometimes it is a sign that the mind is preparing to move toward a more authentic direction. As the individual gradually discovers values and goals that reflect their evolving identity, a new form of motivation can begin to emerge, one that is no longer driven by past expectations, but by a deeper understanding of who they are becoming. Constant pressure to achieve can slowly exhaust the mind and create a subtle disconnection between a person and their deeper self. In many modern environments, individuals are encouraged to measure their worth through productivity, accomplishments, and visible success. From an early age, people are taught to set goals, compete with others, and constantly strive for improvement. While ambition and effort can lead to growth, an endless demand for achievements can place a heavy psychological burden on the mind. Over time, this pressure can drain emotional energy and weaken the connection a person has with their inner world. When the mind is constantly focused on reaching the next milestone, it rarely has time to pause and reflect. Life becomes a continuous cycle of tasks, expectations, and deadlines. The individual moves from one goal to another without fully processing their experiences or understanding whether those goals truly align with their inner values. At first, this pace may feel exciting because progress and recognition provide a sense of validation. However, as the pressure continues to build, the pursuit of achievement can begin to feel more like an obligation than a meaningful choice. The deeper self, which is the part of the psyche connected to personal meaning, creativity, and emotional truth, requires space and stillness to express itself. When a person is constantly driven by external expectations, that inner voice becomes quieter and more difficult to hear. Decisions begin to revolve around what is expected, rewarded, or socially admired rather than what genuinely resonates within the individual. As a result, the person may gradually lose touch with their authentic interests and emotional needs. Mental exhaustion often follows this prolonged state of pressure. The mind can only maintain intense focus and productivity for limited periods before it begins to resist. When rest and reflection are ignored, psychological fatigue accumulates beneath the surface. A person may begin to feel drained even after completing tasks successfully. The sense of satisfaction that once followed achievement may slowly fade, replaced by a feeling that nothing is ever enough. No matter how much progress is made, another goal immediately appears, creating an endless cycle that offers little emotional fulfillment. Another effect of constant pressure is the development of internal tension between the external self and the deeper self. The external self is the part of the personality shaped by roles, responsibilities, and societal expectations. It learns how to perform, compete, and maintain a certain image in the world. The deeper self, however, seeks authenticity, meaning, and emotional balance. When achievement becomes the dominant focus of life, the external self may grow stronger, while the deeper self becomes neglected. This imbalance can lead to feelings of emptiness, confusion, or a persistent sense that something important is missing. Over time, this disconnection may cause motivation to weaken, even though the person continues to work hard. The mind begins to question the purpose behind its constant effort. Tasks that once felt important may start to feel mechanical or emotionally distant. The individual may struggle to understand why their drive has faded despite their continued commitment to success. When the mind is given time to rest and reconnect with deeper values, clarity often begins to return. Reflection, solitude, and meaningful experiences can help restore the connection between action and inner purpose. As this connection strengthens, the person may rediscover a healthier form of motivation, one that is guided not only by achievement, but also by a deeper understanding of what truly brings meaning and fulfillment to their life. Periods of low motivation are often viewed as signs of failure, weakness, or lack of discipline. Many people feel frustrated or even ashamed when they experience a loss of drive, especially in a world that constantly praises productivity and ambition. However, these quiet phases of reduced motivation can serve a much deeper psychological purpose. Rather than representing stagnation, they can act as important crossroads in a person. As inner life moments where the mind pauses its forward momentum in order to reflect, reassess, and become more aware of what truly matters. Human beings naturally move through cycles of activity and introspection. Yet in modern life, there is often little space allowed for psychological pauses. People are encouraged to keep moving forward, keep producing, and keep chasing goals without questioning whether those goals still hold meaning. When motivation suddenly weakens, it disrupts this constant momentum. The individual may feel confused or restless because the drive that once guided their actions is no longer present. But this interruption can open the door to deeper awareness. When motivation fades, the mind is no longer fully occupied with pursuing external achievements. This creates a kind of psychological silence that many people initially find uncomfortable. Without the familiar structure of constant activity, a person may begin to notice thoughts, emotions, and questions that were previously ignored. They might start wondering why they have been following a certain path, whether their goals still reflect their values, or whether their lifestyle truly supports their well-being. These questions often emerge naturally when the mind is no longer distracted by endless tasks. This stage of reflection can feel unsettling because it challenges long-held assumptions about identity and direction. Many people build their sense of purpose around productivity and achievement. When motivation disappears, it can feel as though that identity is temporarily dissolving. Yet, This temporary uncertainty can create the conditions for deeper self-understanding. Instead of simply continuing along a familiar path, the individual has the opportunity to explore new perspectives about their life, their priorities, and their relationship with success. Low motivation can also reveal emotional patterns that were previously hidden beneath constant activity. When a person slows down, they may begin to recognize feelings of dissatisfaction, exhaustion, or emotional conflict that had been quietly accumulating over time. These realizations are not always comfortable, but they are often necessary for personal growth. Awareness allows individuals to confront aspects of their lives that may require change, healing, or greater balance. Another important aspect of these psychological crossroads is the chance to reconnect with the inner self. During busy periods of life, people often make decisions based on external expectations, responsibilities, and social pressures. Reflection allows the deeper parts of the psyche to re-emerge. The individual may rediscover interests, passions, or values that were previously overshadowed by practical demands. In this way, the absence of motivation can gradually transform into a search for more meaningful direction. Although these periods may appear unproductive from the outside, they often play a crucial role in personal development. They encourage a person to step back from automatic habits and observe their life with greater clarity. Through reflection and awareness, the mind begins to reorganize its priorities, preparing for a new phase of growth that is more aligned with the individual's evolving sense of purpose and understanding. True motivation rarely comes from pressure, comparison, or the need to satisfy external expectations. While these forces can push a person to act for a period of time, they often fail to sustain genuine energy and commitment in the long run. Real motivation begins to emerge when a person's actions align with a deeper sense of meaning, when what someone does in their daily life reflects their inner values, interests, and understanding of purpose. Motivation becomes more natural and enduring. Many people initially build their ambitions around what they believe they should pursue. Society often presents clear images of success, career status, financial achievement, recognition, or approval from others. These external standards can strongly influence the choices individuals make. A person may work tirelessly to meet expectations set by family, culture, or social norms. During the early stages of this pursuit, motivation may feel strong because it is supported by encouragement, competition, and the desire for validation. However, external motivation often carries an underlying tension. When actions are guided primarily by what others expect, the connection between effort and personal meaning becomes weak. The individual may achieve certain milestones, but still feel emotionally unfulfilled or disconnected from their work. Over time, the mind begins to question why so much energy is being invested into goals that do not deeply resonate within the individual's inner world. This is often the point where motivation begins to fade. The return of genuine motivation usually requires a shift in perspective. Instead of focusing only on what is expected or admired by others, a person begins to examine what truly feels meaningful to them. This process often involves honest self-reflection. Individuals may start asking deeper questions about what kind of life they want to build, what values matter most to them, and what activities bring them a sense of authenticity and engagement. As this awareness grows, priorities often begin to change. Goals that once seemed essential may gradually lose their importance, while other interests that were previously ignored may start to feel more significant. This shift does not necessarily mean abandoning responsibility or ambition. Instead, it involves redefining the purpose behind one's actions so that they reflect inner conviction rather than external pressure. When actions align with deeper meaning, the experience of effort itself begins to transform. Work no longer feels like something that must constantly be forced through discipline alone. Instead, there is a sense of internal support behind the effort being made. Challenges may still arise, and persistence is still required, but the individual feels connected to the reason they are moving forward. This connection creates a steadier form of motivation that is less dependent on praise, comparison, or temporary rewards. Another important aspect of meaning-driven motivation is the sense of personal ownership it creates. When individuals pursue goals that truly resonate with their values, They feel responsible for their own path rather than simply following a script written by others. This sense of ownership strengthens commitment and resilience because the direction being followed reflects the individual as authentic identity over time. This alignment between action and meaning can restore the energy that was once lost. Motivation no longer appears as something that must be constantly searched for or forced into existence. Instead, it arises naturally from the connection between the person's inner world and the life they are actively creating through their choices and actions. So if you find yourself in a season where motivation has disappeared, do not rush to judge yourself too harshly. Sometimes the mind withdraws its energy not to punish you, but to guide you towards something more honest. What feels like emptiness may actually be a quiet invitation to look inward, to question the direction you have been following, and to rediscover what truly matters to you. Every human life passes through moments where the old path loses its meaning before the new one becomes clear. These moments can feel uncomfortable because they force us to face uncertainty, yet within that uncertainty lies an opportunity to listen more carefully to the deeper voice within us that often gets drowned out by expectations, pressure, and constant activity. Motivation is not something that can always be forced through sheer willpower. It grows naturally when our actions reflect our authentic values, and when our goals resonate with a deeper sense of purpose. When we begin to live in alignment with who we truly are, energy slowly returns. The mind becomes clearer, effort feels more meaningful, and the direction of life starts to feel genuine again. So instead of fearing the loss of motivation, try to understand what it may be revealing. It may be showing you that something within you is changing, evolving, or asking for a new path. And when you have the courage to listen to that inner shift, what once felt like a loss can become the beginning of a more authentic and powerful chapter of your life.